So this is a great chapter to come back to, and it opens up with us seeing Reggie finally dying. I wasn't like upset with him. I thought he was fine. I'm kind of just ready to move on to the next thing. But he's going over the logistics of their battle, and he says outsmarted by a modern day sorcerer. And it made me remember that, like, oh, that's right. Reggie kind of implied that he may have been a sorcerer from 1,000 years ago, because he like name dropped Kenjaku before, right? And maybe Tengen too. And that's just interesting because he has more of a like contemporary curse technique. But then again, I don't even really know how the curse techniques work. I mean, it hasn't ever really fully been explained yet how all this jujutsu and curse stuff works, but I'm sure it'll ultimately end with Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. But Megumi asks him, like, what's your relationship to Master Tengen? And Reggie's like, Tengen? Oh, right, that shut-in would still be alive. Meaning that, like, Tengen was always kind of, like, you know, doing his own thing. Which is understandable because he kind of has to. He's like the backbone of the jujutsu world. But then Megumi, like, cuts him off and he's like, okay, that's enough. It's like, why? This dude knows Tengen and was from 1,000 years ago. I would be asking him hundreds of questions. And then we get this subtle little implication here from Megumi that Tengen might be working with Kenjaku, and I guess that was always a possibility, but I really hope that that is not the case. I'm personally just not a fan of the overarching villain to have contrived everything and for him to be connected and have done everything that we see in the series. I mean, it's fine if he does a majority, which Kenjaku clearly has done, and it's going to be revealed that he's done even more. Like when we see Sumiki later on in this chapter, I'm pretty positive she is related to him in some way. I mean, if you go into Megumi's backstory with how he met Sumiki and how their whole family dynamic works, it makes total sense if that is because of Kenjaku. But Megumi's saying, like, Reggie's reaction to Tengen makes it seem unlikely that he's working with Kenjaku, and I hope that that's Gege right here saying that, like, guys, Tengen is like his own thing, he's not working with Kenjaku. I just hope that that's the case, because I would personally just be kind of disappointed if Tengen was working with him. It would just be too much at that point, you know? But then Reggie winds up giving Megumi his 41 points, and his reasoning is that he's just a spectator and that he's not really close with Kenjaku, which is obviously the truth here, but also we don't fully understand the backstory of the culling game yet. We don't know all of the deals that Kenjaku made with all of these people back 1,000 years ago. So I'm assuming not all of them were necessarily integral to the plan. Maybe there was just some that were like, hey, I'll join because, you know, why not? And I guess Reggie was one of them. But then right before he dies, he says, let fate toy with you before you die like a fool. And that's super interesting because I always kind of suspected that Megumi could die at the end. Gege said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember where he said it, but he had already like known Megumi's full story, like since the beginning, as where that's not the case with all of the other characters. And I'm pretty sure I know one of Megumi's huge moments in the series that's going to happen like towards the end, but him dying was something that I wasn't entirely sure about, but this could be foreshadowing that possibly. Not saying it's guaranteed, and I certainly hope it's not. I love Megumi just like the rest of us, but just, you know, don't be too surprised if he winds up, you know. So then we're coming back to Takaba versus Hazanoki. Huge fan of Takaba, by the way, really liking this character. And we're seeing more of his curse technique, and apparently he's covering himself with ankake sauce. But Hazanoki says, like, with how many times I've bombed him, he should be dead 5 times over by now. And we see that he only has like a little bit of frizzy hair as a result of the damage. And he even regenerated somehow. But Hazanoki thinks that he didn't use reverse curse technique to do it. But then the Kogane appears and tells Hazanoki that Reggie had died, and then Hazanoki's like, alright, I don't want to play anymore. And Takaba, being the good guy that he is, just lets him go. But like, he asks him for his points, of course, which is smart. But Hazanoki refuses, and I talked about this in my spoilers video, but I'm pretty sure Hazanoki's gonna come back. He might even come back as like a baby face, which I'm on board with because he seems like a fine character who has potential to be very likable. And I guess it's also implied that he might be from 1,000 years ago as well, since he's so heavily tied to Reggie. Not really sure about that yet. Maybe he says it earlier. I don't really remember. Let me know in the comments. But then we're getting Takaba's Takaba's curse technique reveal here, and apparently it's called comedian. When he comes up with something that he's certain will be funny, it becomes reality. It's a curse technique capable of opposing even Gojo. But when it comes to his own curse technique, he's utterly clueless. So at first you're like, oh my god, this is so broken, and it is. But on the other side, to balance this out, apparently Takaba's not even really aware of it. So that, like I said, kind of gives it this balance in a pretty cool way. Obviously, if this was in the hands of somebody more capable, they would be owning the culling game. But since it's in Takaba's hands, it makes it fair. Kind of like King from One Punch Man. He's pretty much God, but he doesn't know it. And I'm sure you've all been thinking of applications for this ability and how it could work, and so have I. But it ultimately comes down to the more nuanced rules of this technique, which I'm sure we're going to go into as the culling game furthers. But I'm really looking forward to seeing more of Takaba. He's one of the highlights of this arc for sure. Along with Higuruma, which clearly have this purposeful dichotomy going on. But we're coming back to Remy, and we're getting like a little bit of her backstory, which I don't really care about, to be honest. But it's just showing us, you know, why she is the way that she is, getting by on her looks. But in her internal monologue, she's using like wolf analogies, and then coincidentally, we see the divine dog come behind her, and he's about to, you know, which he rightfully should. But then we see like Sumiki appear in Megumi's mind telling him no. And like I said earlier, it's so likely that Sumiki is a product of Kenjaku in some way. I mean, he straight up made Yuji, so this isn't really that far-fetched. But then Megumi complies and he calls the dog off. Foolishly. And then, out of nowhere, Hanakurusu shows up. The angel sorcerer who has the ability to remove curse techniques. The one that Tengen asked them all to single out because she is integral to the plan of opening the back door of the prison realm to release Gojo. But when we found out what her curse technique was, we knew that she was easily one of the most dangerous sorcerers, not only in the culling game, but just in the series in general. Now, Megumi getting knocked out here, I don't think she, took his curse technique because he would die, and I don't think he's dying yet. I mean, we're not at the end of the series, but I'm assuming she knocked him out because pretty sure Kenjaku is interested in Megumi as well, but not nearly as much as Sukuna, obviously. But Hanakurusu is a pretty interesting character because we don't really know anything about her yet, so I'm really interested to see where her allegiance lies. I mean, we're just led to believe that pretty much everyone in the culling game is boys with Kenjaku to some extent, but I don't think it's that black and white. I mean, we just saw with Reggie that he was kind of just like an acquaintance of him or something. But then we're cutting away from that, and we're coming to a bunch of new sorcerers. This one guy, Dhruv Lakwala, however you say his name, it doesn't really matter what his backstory is because he's getting instantly killed at the end here. But the really interesting guy here is this rockabilly dude, the Ryu Ishigori. It says that he's a hotshot who boasts the highest cursed energy output of all of the players. So I guess this means like all of the players in the culling game, not just in this colony, because I think Gege would have specified it if it was that. Meaning that he has a higher cursed energy, meaning that he has a higher cursed energy output than even a Kotsu, which makes this guy like nigh unbeatable. Then we're coming to another crazy looking powerhouse boss type character with Takako Uro, but her curse technique allows her to control the sky. Yeah, it's getting really crazy now. And then we see Kuro Uroishi, a cockroach curse spirit from Kenjaku, freed from his curse spirit manipulation, which he obtained from Geto. Its rank is special grade, of course, and it's lying dormant until certain conditions disappear. Interesting. Not appear, but disappear. So keep that in mind. But they all aren't working together and they're not cohesive, so they're kind of at a standoff right now. But we're coming back to this Dhruv guy, and he's getting instantly taken out by our boy Okotsu, who is finally back in the game. Really excited to see Okotsu because he's awesome. And I was kind of just getting bored with like the Demon Slayer approach that Gege has been doing with the last couple chapters, where we're just seeing this one singular fight draw on for like a couple chapters. And I'm not saying that's always necessarily a bad thing, but we went from Yuji versus Higuruma, which was amazing, but then we went right into Megumi versus Reggie, and I kind of just wanted to see other things going on. So it's nice to see Kotsu show up here and just squashing this Dhruv guy who was kind of built up to be a the powerhouse. But the final narration here says 3 months after the night parade of 100 demons, Yuta came back to become a special grade sorcerer, second only to Gojo in unusual abilities. Very unusual indeed, because it's still not fully explained why Rika is still cursing him.